Hey everybody, I'm Dan. Welcome back to the channel. Let's get right to it. We've got here a custom trailer hitch that we put together on this Ford Transit Connect van. It's a little city van. We've done an awesome amount of things with it. Today we're going to talk about how we moved a bunch of brush and wood and trees after Hurricane Ian. We had this thing set up before Hurricane Ian, and as you know, we can take a regular trailer hitch that'll hook here. We'll have a little tow bar. It'll come out to about here. But if you're going to tow anything or do anything, then you have to play with the straps, and we can get into that later. We wanted to move this back far because we're dealing with wood. We're dealing with branches. Things are going to be flipping and flopping all over the place. We wanted to protect the van from getting scratched. And nothing ever got scratched in our project and our mission here to clean up after Hurricane Ian back in 2022, which was great. So what we did is we decided to come back one length here. So we used this tow ever 2-inch bar and we put it back here. But then we found when we had the box built, we couldn't open the doors and access the back of the van. So that's when we came up with the idea to put another 2-inch section on here. In addition to that, to set up a section here. So what we did for the component, and then we built this green box, and we'll get into it later as to how we use it. But here are the components right here. We have 2 extensions. This extension has a T on it because that was part of this assembly, which is actually designed to hold a vise. You may have seen those items on Amazon and elsewhere, maybe Northern Tool, where you can actually put a vise on this plate and have it behind your work truck, and you can use it out in the field. Well, we actually don't have a vise installed in our garage, so we can use this on our van or on our Kona, our other vehicle, and we actually have a place for a vise, so it works out awesome. In addition to that, we welded another square block here, and that's for another use for the van when we put an 11-foot work surface on, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. The other thing we did is we took a 2-inch box, and if Mary wants to go ahead and zoom in on the camera, we took a 2-inch receiver piece and welded 2 grab hooks to it. And then since this bar is adjustable, we took this large bolt and we were able to run it up and down, and this is generally where we would set up our chain set up when we were going to haul trees, logs, and brush. So what we did is we made this box, and it's just a simple box made out of 2x8s, and we put 4 bolts on the bottom of it, and we put 2 chain hooks on, and it very simply bolts onto the top of the plate. And the reason we made this up is so we can put tools, gloves, drinks, chains, anything in that we needed. I'm just going to put a couple bolts on it for now just to secure it in place while we're talking. There. And you notice it's got a little bit of wobble to it, and that's because anytime you come out of a trailer hitch, you have a little bit of a wobble. Every time you add something to a trailer hitch, you introduce a little more wobble. Well, let me tell you, the trees and the brush didn't care whether it wobbled a little bit. We were able to put our small chainsaw in here, have it stick out, hand tools, anything else, and it worked out really well. Here's the chain we used. This is a 5/16 high-grade logging chain. And what we did, as you saw in the thumbnail, we have logging hooks that we use, and these actually hold the chain real well. The chain goes through and it can't easily slide out. Loggers use them all the time, so we were able to buy them on Amazon. So what would happen is we would hook the chain onto the vehicle. We would have a tree here, and you'll see that in the B-roll. We would wrap the chain around the tree or whatever, and once it was wrapped around, we'd pull up on it, anchor it here, and the rest of the chain would be put into the box. And we hauled tons and tons of material like this. We never had any problem. We wouldn't have any chain hanging down like this. Obviously, it would be here in the load, and you'll see that in the B-roll. You might notice the clearance here. There's not much clearance on the bottom, maybe 6 or 8 inches. Again, we never had a problem. If we were to do this again, we would maybe cut this assembly, angle it up, and just bring it so it's maybe a foot high, and then rework this. For what we had, it really worked out well. Mary's now going to pause the camera and we're going to get a different view of the setup. All right, to get a full-on view or a face-on view of what we got here, again, you can see how the grab hook just grabs the chain and it holds it right in place. We'd have the load, the other side would be hooked on, and then everything else would go in the box. The nice thing about this setup is that it's adjustable. And if we needed to raise this piece up, we could bring it up higher, but then it was hard to get at the chain. If we needed to come down lower, we could just take the bolt, and you don't have to use a bolt. You can use a clevis pin or whatever you need, but for us, we used the bolt and a long bolt for a specific reason. And again, you see this was adjustable, so it was a nice little homemade thing that we welded up, and it worked out really well for us. So now Mary's going to pause the camera again, and I'm going to show the tarp setup that we used. All right, I'm going to use this little bench here. It makes it a whole lot easier to work on stuff like this. So Mary took the camera, and then we were able to show you the adjustable hook assembly that we made, and this thing was really handy. As you can see with the strap, we also used it, and we hooked it like this, using the long bolt to hold it in place. And we used this strap that was hooked to a tarp. We had a 16 by 20 foot tarp, and we would load brush onto that thing, and we would use the van to actually drag the brush out of the community and into a collection zone where FEMA would come by and pick it up. Now, I'll just use this as a representation of how we did that. Our tarp, again, was 16 feet wide by 20 feet long. So what we did is we folded it. So it was 8 by 20. And then what we did is we actually folded it in a couple times. I'm not sure if you can see this on the camera, but we folded it in a couple times like you would a paper airplane till we had about a 5-foot section here. Then we took a 6-foot furring strip, and we'll use this nail file as a furring strip, and we put it here, and then we wrapped the tarp over that twice, once, twice, and now the tarp wasn't going anywhere. And then we took a little smaller furring strip, and we had holes drilled here and holes drilled here, and we pinched the 2 furring strips together just like a big clamp. And that way it kept that tarp locked in place. Finally, we had a hole drilled on each end of the clamp on the furring strip. And what we did is we used these shackles, and we actually took these shackles and attach them on each end of the furring strip. We never had the strips break. We never had a problem with anything. And then all we needed to do was to simply load up the tarp and then back the van up, put this strap over the box down by the bolt, and then we would pull off. There were times that we had to go back to the site to pick up more stuff, and what we would simply do is unload the tarp, swing it around to the front of the van, and we used the tow hook that you guys are probably familiar with. Tow hook with the left-hand thread, and they normally go into your vehicle to be able to pull you up onto a tow truck. We took this, and most every vehicle has an access in the front of the vehicle. We put it up front. We took another shackle. We grabbed this strap. We hooked it to it and backed the van to the destination, and then we were able to get the tarp back to where we needed. We unhooked it, swung it around to the back of the van, and worked. So we had the van going back and forth, back and forth. So these are the kinds of tips and tricks that we used. Now Mary's going to go ahead and pause the video, and we'll talk about the next part. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is the angle here. When I take the strap off, I'm sure they're going to be those loggers and some of the He-Man mechanics among you guys will say, "Hey, wait, look at this angle. This is a weak point. This thing is so tall. How did you not bend this part or bend this part or damage this?" We didn't worry about it because when we were pulling brush with the strap was loaded here, so we weren't all the way up top. We weren't giving full leverage onto the stress point. We were pulling about halfway down, and we might have had 500 or 600 pounds on the tarp, but we had a low friction because the tarp slid along well, and we were not in dirt and grass for the most part. For the most part, we were working on a roadway, and we were working off of a sidewalk. And this is not a 4-wheel drive van. It's a front-wheel drive van with street tires, so we knew that we couldn't pull a lot off in the grass. So we would just stay on the road surface or the sidewalk surface. And we had so much crap that we had to pick up that you'll see it like you see in the B-roll, that we had plenty of traction and we just didn't overload the van. And this little thing was nimble and strong, and it just moved right along. It really helped us out. Back to the angle, when we were pulling logs, once we lifted a log up, and we'd have trees 12, 16 inches in diameter, it'd be 40 feet long, and we'd be pulling them. When you're on asphalt or even on grass with the load, pulling it off from being on the tar, your rolling resistance is not that bad because the branches that were on the trees were supporting it, so it wasn't a lot to pull. So we didn't use this thing like a log skidder workhorse to move the big stuff. We had landscapers with tractors and other stuff. But when it came to anything like 15 inches, 12 inches or smaller, we were able to move tons and tons of that material because there was not a lot of stress at this point. Now, granted, when we were done, this thing was a little bent over to the left. It's a little shakier than it was when it was brand new, which is understandable. And we do have a little more movement here than we did when the thing was brand new. It's not a problem for us. It did its job. It's ready to work again. So we keep the components. If we ever have to do disaster cleanup or assistant disaster cleanup in our own community, we've got the components, we've got the chains, we've got the experience and the know-how, and we can adapt this to any vehicle and get it done. As long as you've got a 2-inch trailer hitch on your vehicle, you can use something like this. And in a non-storm environment, remember, we can take this box off again, and we can also go ahead and put a vise on top of this. Mary's going to pause the camera, and we're going to show you yet another use for this cool stand. All right, now here's another use for this cool platform that you can put on the back of your vehicle. We had a good friend of ours make up a nice table, and this table, as you see, is a 2-level table made out of wood. Got a couple of different things, and again, it's got bolts. You can take this and bolt it right on that plate, and if you ever need to, you're going down the road, you can open up your van, and we've done this before. If we're pulling 12 or 16 foot long items that we don't want to put on top of the van, we can actually have them inside and have them resting on here, strap things down, and we have a big load out here with a flag on it. So that's actually worked out to be quite wonderful. And because the table is so wide, it was important that we had that extra piece of the trailer hitch to go back so that we could easily open and close the doors with this table set up. Now, the other thing that Mary did was Mary made a cover for this table, and that way it would protect whatever we were pushing from getting damaged or scratched. So that's the slip cover table that she made. And when we were driving down the road, Mary also sewed up a little fanny flag. So we had a nice safety flag, and this alerted people to the fact that we had something sticking out greater than 3 feet from the back of our van. So this is another use for this table. And the way this relates to disaster preparedness for us was after the storm, we could switch off from the box, we could make up the table, we could be parked talking to people, we could have clipboards directing our landscapers, doing the different things that we could do. We could also put our little camp stove on it and have our propane in the van and cook up a hot dog or a hamburger or two for the volunteer crew that we had. So it's just a really versatile way to do things with a van using standard parts that you can buy at Amazon, that you can buy at Lowe's or Home Depot or an auto parts store. So thank you very much for watching the video. We hope that we've inspired you on some neat ways that you can use your existing vehicle and some easy to acquire parts to make one heck of an easy cleanup process for you after a storm. Thanks for watching. Hey, we're going to show you the slip knot technique for using a chain. These logging hooks are slip hooks. They're not grab hooks. A grab hook can work well, but it's easier to use a slip hook. We're going to pretend that this traffic cone is a tree and it's headed about 40 feet that way. Now, with this traffic cone, if we go to hook it with a chain, it's going to want to rotate to where the hook is. But with a tree, it doesn't do that because the tree is 40 feet long. It bends to the left, bends to the right with branches. So once it's down, it pretty much stays in place. They rarely roll. So what we would do is we would take our hook, we would pass it around the tree, around the trunk, and it might take 1 or 2 people to do it. And then when we hook it, we turn the hook so that the opening is to the back, so that when you actually hook up the chain, you're pulling on the meat of the hook. That's what's pulling against the truck. Then what we do is we set the hook underneath the tree, and ideally it would be like this. And then one or two of us would lift this thing up, hook it in, and that's it. So the tree would be out like this. It would not want to turn. Your slip hook is down here holding onto the load. When we'd get to the staging area, we would pull the tree in, we'd back up a little bit, we would unhook the chain, take the hook and unhook it, remove it from the tree, cast it off, and be ready for another run. And that's the slip hook technique.